Welcome to Frontline Conversations. Today we have with us Haroon Siddiqui, author of Unapologetic MMR. Haroon is a veteran Canadian journalist with a career spanning nearly 6 decades. He was born in pre independence India in Warangal and raised in Hyderabad, and had a brief journalistic career in India. In the 1960s, Haroon emigrated to Canada, and there he rose from being a reporter to the editorial page editor. In 2023, the Canadian Journalism Foundation awarded Haroon with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Haroon's Unapologetic is a remarkable personal history of migration and identity, and of a Muslim journalist confronting Western media narratives. The book was published in Canada with the title My Name is Not Harry, and is being published in India by Southside Books. Welcome to Frontline Conversations, Haroon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Haroon, you have lived a life between two countries and hold a sense of belonging to both. Let's start from what was your first home. You were born in Warangal and raised in Hyderabad in the shadow of Hyderabad's annexation and police violence of 1948. You call it a mini trauma in your book. But despite all that, you also call it a gloriously happy childhood. How did this period shape your sense of identity and belonging?
Yes, there was a trauma of 1947, but much of the trauma and division and murder and mayhem took place in the north. South was spared, as you know. 1948 police action, as it was called, was a new turmoil in history of Hyderabad because the existing political and social order were dismantled. One can debate the way it was dismantled and so on. But the great thing was by about 1950, most people had put aside the traumas of 1947 and 50 and were uh, emerging a Nehruvian vision of a secular India. And people were living in social harmony. That's what I most remember about it. Most of my teachers were Hindu, my mentors were Hindu. We were lived in a neighborhood where all people lived in peace. What I usually tell is my first two tutors at home, Ramchandra Rao sir and Pandit Chakrapani, they used to come to tutor us in various subjects. Pandit Chakrapani used to teach us Telugu, and both were vegetarian. So my mother made sure that, of course, nothing non-vegetarian was served to them, but she assured both of them that the utensils and the cups and so on that they use and the utensils in which the chai was made or anything else was made has been set aside separately just for them. And it reassured them that their vegetarianism was not affected in a Muslim household. They were further assured that the that the cook was a Hindu lady by the name of Gatti. So what that tells you is that these are very religious people. My parents were very religious. My father was an Orthodox Muslim. Here were two Brahmins. They deeply respected each other, which is not our cliche. Modern cliche is you're religious, so you must be bigoted. You have to be secular, quote unquote. You have to be small and liberal to be open-minded. No, I mean, some deeply religious people are sometimes more liberal, more secular than the so-called seculars these days. So that kind of deep understanding, it was very Indian and very historic and syncretic Indian culture and so on. So we were a product of that and we were beneficiaries of that. So that is the thing. And all I remember was a happy childhood, surrounded by love, by both parents and everyone else. That's my memory.
Harun, your first journalistic job was as an intern at The Hindu in the 1960s, after which you joined PGI in Mumbai. But journalism wasn't your first career choice. Could you tell us how you arrived at journalism as the career?
So I'd failed at pre-medicine, I'd failed at pre-engineering, then I went into BSc in Hyderabad, barely passed. Then I took admission in MA literature, um, and then a journalism department was already there in Osmania University, but it had become a graduate course. So I went and asked my English professor, their mentor, TGV being TG Vaidyanathan, say, "Sir, I'm thinking of journalism. What do you think?" And he said, "I think it will work out for you." So I went and told my father, "I'm thinking of journalism." So his first reaction was not, "What the hell are you doing? Make up your damn mind." He said, "Have you asked TGV?" That's his first reaction. And I said, "I've asked TGV and TGV thinks it will work out." And his answer was profound. I didn't realize it then, but I realized it much later in life. His answer was profound. "If it's all right with TGV, it's all right with me." So, what is happening here is in the Indian pantheon, parents and teachers occupy very high places and both respect each other. TGV said, "It will work out, go and talk to your father." Father says, "Is it all right with TGV? It's all right by me." So, I mean, that is, it speaks to a profound respect for each other and teacher and parent. And then the head of the department was from Madras also, S.A. Govindarajan, who had been the Hindu. And secured me he wrote a letter of recommendation and I got an internship at the Hindu, which I enjoyed thoroughly, where Mr. Kasturi sort of looked after me, asked me, "How are you doing? Where are you staying? How much money have you brought? Eat in the subsidized cafeteria of the Hindu. Don't waste your father's money." On and on. It's like such a loving kind of relationship. It was a good experience. Then I joined Press Trust of India in what was then Bombay, at a grand salary of 250 rupees a month, which lasted only 10 days. After which used to send telegrams to my father, "Please send money." So after a few months, it seems I told my mother, "वो टेलीग्राम खोलने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, just पैसे भेज दो, no need to open the telegram. We know what it's going to say." So that's how it started.
Your journalistic career was briefly interrupted due to your father's health, and you had to come back to Hyderabad to take care of your business. Did you think you're going to go back to journalism after that?
Now, what happened was that when I was in Mumbai, then Bombay, my father had a heart attack, so I had to go back to Hyderabad. And I never came back to PTI because what happened was that he had a severe heart attack. I had to take over his business. And a year and a half later, he died. So then I ran the business along with my younger brother. Journalism was completely interrupted, other priorities and family priorities and so on. And then later, in 1967, I migrated to Canada. That's how it went. And when I came here, that was year 67. And I came because I was not able to decide where to go. A lot of friends the Christian friends had gone to Australia, for example, because Australia had an immigration policy at that time of preferring Christians. A lot of Christian friends from Hyderabad, especially from the cricket team, had gone to Australia. Some friends had gone to England. There used to be what was called a voucher system. Um, I had admission in Syracuse University in the United States. I thought I should go and do my master's, but then I had to earn a living. So I had admission. I had immigration to Canada, so I came to Canada. So it was a series of accidents that just happened as a matter of luck that I landed in Canada.
Harun, once you moved to Canada, what was the hardest adjustment in the initial period, and how long did it take for you to find a journalistic job?
I did not get a job in journalism. I say, "Oh, you don't have Canadian experience." Well, how do you get Canadian experience unless you're employed? So it's like a circularity to it. You can't have a job because you don't have Canadian experience. You cannot get a job, so you cannot accumulate Canadian experience. Yeah, round and round it goes. So I worked in a department store selling men's clothing for about 8 months or so. I was the best dressed young man because it was a men's clothing store. So whatever was on stock, you could buy for half the price or one third the price, sometimes 10% at the last bit of suits and so on. And then what had happened was I had gone to the national newspaper called the Globe and Mail, and he had said, get Canadian experience. So I said, where will I get Canada? I know a place in the middle of the prairies in the province of Manitoba. You go there. So I said, Clark Davy was his name. I said, Mr. Davy, it is colder than in Toronto. Why would I go there? So I worked as a men's clothing salesman. Nobody would give me a job anywhere. I have a stack of letters, rejection letters from everyone. From that time, even the littlest magazine or newspaper in a small town would not give me a job. So I went back to Mr. Davy. I said, I swallowed my pride. What about this job in Brandon, Manitoba? He said, no problem, I'll phone them. And he phoned them and they said, come along. And I went. That's a good 1,500 miles west of Toronto in a minus 30-degree weather. And I landed at the Brandon Sun and they made me a city hall reporter. So you cover city council meetings from 8 to midnight. And here I am sitting in City Hall talking about municipal politics, sewers, water system. I have been at Brabourne Stadium in India covering cricket. Uh, I've seen Abbas Ali Beg made 100 runs and a woman rushed down from the pavilion to kiss him. Such tamasha, such excitement. And here I am sitting in a lonely chamber, City Hall, listening to politicians talking about sewer lines. How boring can it get? So that's how it started.
Harun, once you started your career in Canada, what got you through those first years and how was your career progression?
Within 2 years, they had made me city editor, which meant supervising the other reporters and so on, and covering elections, provincial elections, that is state elections, and then at the time of the federal election, federal politicians would come through the town, so you covered those, you got more experience. And 4 years later, they made me managing editor. So it was a steady progression, and I was fortunate to be there at a time when the owner was a very small and liberal man and who allowed us to roam far and wide. And towards the end, he said, whenever you're going to India for a holiday, take out press credentials in Delhi and write about Delhi, write about India. You're stopping in Iran, write about Iran. So even though it was a small newspaper, he provided the chances for people to expand their horizons. So that was a good experience until 1978 when I came to the Toronto Star, which is Canada's largest newspaper.
At Toronto Star, you started from being a reporter and rose to being the editorial page editor for the Canada's largest selling newspaper. What changed the course of your career while you were at Toronto Star?
You see, we have to know the times in which we were operating. Newspapers were very highly profitable businesses at that time, 22% profit, that is unheard of now, which is a way of saying they were floating in money. Um, and when the editor who hired me, his name was Ray Timpson, and Ray had known me off and on at conferences. Um, and then they just let you into the newsroom on doing copy editing from one department to the other. I ran into him in the elevator about 3, 4 weeks later. So, how are you doing, young man? So I said, I'm doing terribly. Why did you bring me here? I'm doing copy editing from here, this department to that. He jabbed his fat finger into my chest. I said, you must know something about the Toronto Star. I said, what is it, Ray? And he said, uh, we pay you for what you know, not what you do. Can you believe that? So they used to accumulate talent, or what they thought was talent. So they could afford to do it. And there's just, and then he used to say, when I look out of my glass into the newsroom, I see a dozen foreign correspondents, meaning they're rich in talent. That's what it was. And the same thing happened was that Iranian Revolution had taken place. American hostage crisis was going on. And he came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you're going to Tehran. I said, when? As soon as you can go. And they had great arrangements. Here are American dollars. Here is your plane ticket. Just go home and pack your little suitcase and away you go. So it's a matter of luck. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of the era in which we lived. And 24 hours later, I was in Tehran covering the American hostage crisis. That was a turning point.
You have reported some of the biggest stories of the 70s and the 80s in Iran, Afghanistan, and Iraq. How did reporting from these countries shape your understanding of the Western media narratives? And how did it help develop your own distinct perspective?
Yeah, you see what happened at the American hostage crisis. You're too young to know. Um, American correspondents had descended on Tehran. If memory serves right, 168 or 268 or something like that. Most American correspondents, television cameras, lights would be turned on, and Iranians demonstrating outside the American embassy would perform for the television cameras and say, "Marg bar Shah, death to Shah. Marg bar America, death to America." And the lights would be turned on, and these guys would come down and they would offer pistachios and cigarettes to the reporters, American reporters. And so everyone is chummy, chummy. There's something wrong with this chemistry. Everyone is performing for the cameras, but outside they're lovely people. They're talking to each other. They're offering you pistachios. There was a grizzly Indian correspondent by the name of Dilip Hero from from London. He was an author, and he was sort of became a mentor of sorts. And Dilip said at dinner, "You realize this is all BS." So I said, "What do you mean this is BS?" He said, "This is not reality. This is production for American audiences. They're going nuts. Their people have been held hostage. They have got bonkers. They have lost this country that they have had since the Second World War. Their Pitu Shah has been toppled. They are gone bonkers. And this is all performance. Get out of there and go and report on the rest of the country," which was profound advice. And from the next day, I stopped going to the embassy. And we just go to the bazaar, you go to the masjid, you go where the people are. I got great stories. And people's expectations of the revolution, why they were happy, how they were no longer being hounded by this Shah secret police, Savak, how members of their family had been arrested, jailed, tortured, and so on and so forth. It would later on become a different story that the new liberators would turn torturers themselves. That's always happens. I mean, a revolution ends up eating its own children, kind of an argument. But that changed the relationship, back to your question, with the media. So we live in a bubble. We recycle cliches. Uh, and what helped in Iran was the fact that I was not American. What helped in Iran was I was not a white man from the West. What helped in Iran was I was someone who was a brown color like them, who happened to be Muslim, who was from India. They had good feelings about India. So that told you that your perspectives matter, not only to you, but to the people whom you're reporting. And that all of a sudden, the reporting that I did, which I did not realize at that time, was successful because of that, because of Dilip Hero telling me to get out of there, because of who I was. And I brought a different perspective by the sheer fact of being Indian, having brought up separately, differently than these people.
How was the media coverage back then in Canada, Haroon? And what kind of narratives were dominant? And how did the reportage about migrants evolve in the Canadian newsrooms over the decades?
That, in fact, kept developing in my head without me realizing it. That in Canada, even internal journalism within Canada was affected by this mentality. Bear with me. The mentality was us here, civilized people in Canada, America, the Western world, and the sort of unwashed, uncivilized people in Africa, India, starving India, and so on and so forth. And that was the equation, that was the lens through which most of the reporting took place. There were people who would go to Africa and write racist nonsense, and that would be published. But then what happened? Immigration began. 1960s onwards, immigration was opened up to the rest of the world, to the non-white world. So them were in Canada, part of us. The next door neighbor was a guy from Nigeria. The next door neighbor was a guy from Pakistan and India. And when you were reporting on me, you were treating me still as them. But I'm not them. I'm part of Canada. I'm Canadian. I'm your neighbor. That took a lot of that made it very difficult for Canadian media to understand and realize this is what they were doing. So there was a campaign launched, whole full-fledged campaign across the industry, across the country, and my paper encouraged it. Is we need to change our mindset. The guy living next door is not a foreigner. He's a Canadian citizen. He should be treated as such. The only stories you write about brown people in Canada is about immigration or about crime, perpetuating this myth that immigrants cause problems. Immigrants don't cause problems. Immigrants are the one who are helping sustain the economy. You have brought them here for a reason, and they have talent. They contribute to the taxes. So this evolution took a long time to turn the mind around of people that we may be a majority white nation, but we are not a white majority white country. We are not a Christian country. We are a multicultural country where all people are equal, and the media coverage of that has to reflect it. That is the point.
Harun, how do you see the media coverage in Canada today in the recent times?
It is much better, but there are sections of our media which are shamefully still stuck in the old mode. And this also shows up on reporting on the Israeli-Palestinian issue during the Gaza genocide. Most of the most of the media were still peddling Israeli narrative. The Palestinian narrative barely emerged. So we jump now to the presence of social media. It's a social media, citizen reporting that has rounded out and balanced the narrative of what has happened in Gaza and what has happened now in Iran, for example. So the mainstream media is still stuck, back to your question, in the old narrative.
You have often faced backlash for your perspectives, partly because of your Muslim identity. When did you first began feeling it more sharply, and how crucial was institutional support to you during those periods?
No, you see, it sort of dates back, let me take you back to 9/11. Uh, so what happened? 19 terrorists attacked and killed nearly 3,000 innocent Americans. All 19 terrorists were Muslims. Then it followed that because those terrorists were Muslims, does that mean all Muslims are terrorists? That's one. Number two, overnight almost, uh, from being a Canadian journalist who happened to be a Muslim, I was turned into a Muslim journalist. What do you have to say about this? I'm personally responsible for 9/11, or personally responsible for whatever has happened. So this kind of laying of collective guilt became pervasive all of a sudden, almost overnight. And then when one offered a different kind of point of view, by that time I was a columnist, um, you are accused constantly of being a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer. On and on it went. But as a journalist, you develop a thick hide. You say these are illiterate people, let them be. You just get on with your job. That's what you do. But what lets you do is not your own brilliance or your own courage. What lets you do it is that you have the backing of your newspaper. So Canada's largest newspaper, well funded even then at that time, flush, not so flush with money, but still flush with independence and pride. I said, no, you just keep writing whatever you're writing. So they stood by me as they stood by other people, but that is not around so much. I mean, we have seen the collapse of the Washington Post, the great newspaper that brought President Nixon down. Now Mr. Bezos is cozying up to Mr. Trump. He's offering $20 million to Melania Trump for her wretched documentary. He wants favors from the Trump administration, and he has told his newspaper it can no longer be doing the kind of independent journalism that it has done. We have seen this collapse in front of our eyes. This is what is happening, used to happen in Russia and Soviet Union. Now it's happening in America, the land of free speech and the First Amendment. So you need the backing of your institutions as an individual to wage such battles. I was lucky enough, the era was different, times were different. My employer was good, but that is not always duplicable now. So what are we left with? We're left with New York Times, the great majestic New York Times, which is doing well. You're left with BBC. You're left with The Guardian in England. I don't say that because it's left of center, but independent journalism. That's what I mean. And most of the other newspapers and so on are, what's the word I'm looking for? Are enmeshed in corporate conflicts because they're running other businesses like Turkey. You're doing business with the government, laying pipelines or whatever you're doing, and you're running a newspaper. And Erdogan says, if you do independent journalism, you will be deprived of your pipeline contract. You know, so you lose your courage, you lose your independence, and then you pull things back, and you erode democracy. That's what you do. You erode independent thinking, and combine it with social media where everyone is in silos. We want to talk to only those people who can confirm our prejudices. We want to be in the company of those on Facebook who are like me. You end up hating each other, and something profound happens. The entire premise of democracy is that there is a common cathedral where we all meet, we all debate ideas. But if you are stop talking to each other, I'm talking only to the people who agree with me, what happens to the common cathedral? What happens to the common space? How do you come together? You don't. So this society collapses in front of your eyes. We all sort of enjoy bemoaning Donald Trump. The more serious question is, why did half the American population elect him twice? The one half does not talk to the other. And one half lives in this wonderful world of conspiracy theories, alternate facts, whatever they wish to believe in. And Mr. Trump feeds it every night. And we are seeing this collapse in front of our eyes now. It's happening in parts of India, Turkey. We know what happened in Myanmar. We know what happened at one time in Sri Lanka. So social media is a great thing on the one hand, citizen journalism during Gaza, during this war on Iran. On the other hand, social media feeds paranoia, conspiracy theories, mayhem, murder, hatred. So we live in very complex times.
One of the criticisms that Muslim journalists who are critical of Western media narratives face is that they whitewash or underplay Islamic fundamentalism. You didn't conform to the mainstream narratives, but you were also critical of, say, Taliban, for instance. How does one grapple with such prejudices in newsroom?
It's a it's a profound question. It's a question of majoritarian pressures on minorities. It takes different forms. Do in Rome as the Romans do. No, I won't do as the Romans do. I'll just obey the law. I will be myself. Change your name. No, I won't change my name, which is why the title of the book, My Name is Not Harry in Canada. Why? Because they want you to conform to their way of thinking. There was a great movie, was it The Godfather or whatever? The great scene of boatload of Italian immigrants landing in on what is the island of Manhattan where people land, and there's a great scenes of people, poor emaciated people coming through the line and come to the immigration office. What is your name? Giovanni so and so. Okay, you're John. Your name is changed on a whim, and for the rest of your life, you're John. In modern times, no, I won't change my name. My name is not Harry. I am Haroon. I will remain Haroon. Uh, I'm Muslim. I'll remain Muslim. I'm brown. I can't change it. I'm brown. I'm proud of being brown. That. Then conformity of thought. You should broadly reflect the consensus of society, including its prejudice. No, if I can think originally, I should be allowed to do so. That is the promise of democracy. If you are a minority expressing opinions that don't conform, then they get personal. Oh, you're saying this because you're a brown. Oh, you're saying this because you're a black man. You're saying this because you're Muslim. Oh, you must be a fundamentalist. These are all sort of nonsense. This is a way of grinding people down uh, to conform to what they want. You don't conform their prejudices, they don't like it. And now, in fact, you see, this has become pervasive in the Western world, even in India. Who is a secular person? A secular person is one who hides his Christian identity, who hides his Muslim identity. I am not a fundamentalist Muslim. Okay, so I'm not a Khomeini Muslim. I'm a secular Muslim. Okay, you're secular Muslim. What does that mean? What does it mean is he's he's performing in the same way that the colonial masters expected people to perform. I'm a Hindu, but I'm a Britishized brown man. I'm like you, like me, respect me kind of thing. But it rarely works. The French in Algeria, the British in India uh, tried to take the Muslim out of the Muslim. So the best Muslim is the one who is the least Muslim. The best Hindu is the one who is the least Hindu. He's not very religious. So if you are not very religious, you're a good guy. If you are religious, you're prejudiced, you're this and you're, which is nonsense. India's 4,000-year-old civilization taught us that. How did people of different faiths live together? Because they had deep respect for each other. So back to your question, it's just a way of grinding it down, grinding minorities down. No, no, you must conform to what we say. No, the whole premise of democracy is that we can think for ourselves, you know. And that is being eroded from America to everywhere else. That is the real challenge of the times.
Harun, how was the reception to My Name is Not Harry in Canada?
It was lauded, it was accepted across the country. But if the question is, did I become rich from doing it? No, you don't get rich writing books. There's a friend of mine who said, you write these books because they need to be written. You don't write them to be famous or successful. So it did reasonably well. I was happy.
I think we've reached the end of the interview now. You told me that you visited India some 50 odd times in the last few decades since your immigration to Canada. The last chapter in your book is, in fact, titled My India, My Canada. Why is it so important for you to hold on to both the identities?
The identity is you are who you are. You see, there was a time during the Cold War, for example, people who came from behind the Iron to the West, they wanted to forget everything about their past because it was so horrible for them. So they reinvented them. And countries like, especially the United States, allowed you to reinvent yourself. You were whoever you wanted to be. The modern immigrant or people who come from happy lands, they have no reason to change. It's oppressive for them to be told to change. I tell the story. I mean, when your parents give you names like, uh, um, say, Muhammad, Ali, so on and so forth, Khatija, Aisha, Lakshmi, Ram, whatever, when they give you such names, they give you such names with great hope and desire that every time your name is invoked, it would evoke blessings because these are historic figures and so on. So if you change your name from Muhammad to Mo, you do violence to that spirit of your parents. You know, if they call you Lakshmi, there's a reason. They thought you'll be always uh, rolling in money or whatever. And you change those names, you do violence to that spirit. You should not do it. Uh, and that is the reason that modern immigrants, modern immigration, modern democratic societies uh, have no reason to be have no reason to forget their past. I have happy memories of India. Uh, Once an Indian, always an Indian kind of an argument. So India made me, and Canada sort of let me evolve. So I have two identities, multiple identities. We all have multiple identities. And the more multiple identities we have, the better we are. You see, when Pierre Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister in 1972, made Canada multicultural. And the 1982 Constitution, Section 27 of Canada says Canada is a multicultural nation and the rest of the Constitution shall be interpreted accordingly. That's a historic, profound document. And at that time, he said, we are all diverse people, we have multiple identities. And to ask people to conform to one identity is to restrict ourselves and restrict our minds. The more multiplicity of ideas, multiplicity of identities we have, we should be confident that that leads to a better nation, or words to that effect. So that is the answer to your question. We are who we are. We should be proud of who we are, multiple identities. And a society that encourages multiple identities is a great society.
Thank you, Haroon. I guess the readers of your book will find this humorous side in your book as well. And thank you for joining Frontline Conversations.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.